what it was.
Well, we'll figure it out after this, I guess. So,
Hey,
okay, we're
sorry
live.
we're late, guys.
Yeah. So, hey, another technology. No doubt I pushed the wrong button. What can I say? But thank you for patiently waiting. Welcome to Captive Audience again. It's Sunny and Don on Wonderful Wednesday. What say you, Sunny?
Well, I'm glad to be feeling better, and just it's great to be back with you. I see my name is Don Anderson down there. So,
Well, it'll
oh
have to
well,
do.
yeah,
It's not.
I'm going to be Don Anderson tonight with you. It's it's certainly not a mirror image, but the names are.
Well, it's definitely not your best self. What can you say? It'll have to do.
Yeah, that's fine. Hey, you know
All
what? If
right.
that's the least of my worries.
There we go. Well, I'm just glad to see you again. Sonny's been out with the bug, and so y'all had to deal with just me. Hopefully, it wasn't too much torture, but I'm just glad she's back.
Well, I'm glad to be back. I'm glad I have a voice back, although I still sound, for me, I sound a little bit funny. But hey, it's good to be back. And sorry, we had a little technical difficulty tonight, and but here we are.
Yeah. Well, you sound great and you look great, so we're all good to go
Thank you, Don.
here. All right. Well, I thought I'd start off with another shameless plug. While you're in your absence, Sonny, they've been getting used to my shameless plugs, right? And so this one's about one of the latest rants that I've written. It's about the importance of the national story. I think this is so important. And so I share you the link to read it, but let me just speak to it a little bit. Remember back, I think most of the people on this channel were probably roughly the same age, at least minimum of 30 years old. How about that? But back when we were in school, we all learned the national story, the national identity, who we were as a country, what it meant to be an American. And I thought I would start, and we all learned things in class. Everybody, Pledge of Allegiance, My Country 'Tis of Thee. And I thought I don't know if somebody wants to sing it with me, but remember these words. I think, yeah, she says no. So I won't sing, but you all know these words. My country, 'tis of thee, sweet land of liberty, of thee I sing. Land where my fathers died, land of the pilgrim's pride, from every mountainside let freedom ring, right? We all knew that cold, knew it by heart. And the generations that have come after us, they don't know it. So, how do you have something to live for if you don't have any, you never have anything to live for till you have something to die for, right? And we learn that stuff. It was in our blood. And you have to know your national story. So we're not like any of the country in the world. We're not founded on race, color, any of that stuff. Other countries, if you be Japanese, you got to be Japanese. You'll never be Japanese, right? If you're not French, you're never going to be French. If you're not German, you'll be German. This is like the only place in the world that was ever founded on an idea, and that's what makes us unique. And that is not taught. So if they don't know the national story, I'm talking about things like the ride of Paul Revere, the opening lines to the Gettysburg Address 7 years ago, things that we had to memorize. The day that will live in infamy. JFK's, what we ask not what your country would do for you. Ronald Reagan, Gorbachev, tear down this wall. We didn't know any of that stuff. Booker T. Washington, Frederick Douglass, Missouri Compromise, Louisiana Purchase, Seward's Icebox. They don't know jack. And you see these men in the street interviews where they don't know anything. Even the ones in college have no clue of this stuff. So there's no wonder they don't have a love of country, because they don't know what makes us unique, what makes us different, what makes it special to be an American. And they don't know it unless we tell it to them. And the communists that have taken over our school system, that we conservatives have allowed to take it over, have presented us with a generation that has no national identity. And it's going to be so important for us to give it back to them. And to do that, it's really critical that we communicate and transmit the national story. And then one quick story on us, and then we'll move on to other topics. One of the biggest memories I've had along the same lines must have been 30 years ago. I was at Independence Hall. You guys have been to Independence Hall, Philadelphia? And the docent was fantastic. I mean, this guy knew everything. And everybody in the audience was probably mostly retirees, 65, 70 average age. I was like the young guy there, right? My wife was tied up with the kids, so they weren't there. So I was there by myself, and I'm maybe 35, 40, right? At the end, the docent closes with the whole national story conversation. And what he says is, he says, and everybody in this room knows this, we hold these truths. And then everybody in the room jumped in, around 40 people, to be self-evident and endowed by the Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Every single person in the room recited it with him. And these are people from all over the country, all different walks of life, all different races, creeds, colors, whatever. And I don't know if there was a dry eye in the room when he finished that. That's what it means to have a national identity.
Yeah.
That's what it means to be an American. And I think that was one of the coolest moments I've ever had in terms of love of country. I couldn't believe it. So I just wanted to communicate that to you all. But every citizen should have that. And if we don't give that to them, then we're going to lose it, because we're not a tribe like these other countries. We don't look like each other like these other countries. What we have is far more important than that, though. We are bound by an idea of honor. And I just think we got to transmit that, though. Okay, I'll stop there. My grandfather was a preacher, so I have a tendency to go that route. So there's my soapbox. What say you, Sonny?
I say you are spot on, Don. Spot on, correct. And I really like that you're bringing that out. America is the melting pot. People from all over the world have come here, and for a better life, for a freer life, to be able to worship how they choose and live their life as they choose, as long as they're not hurting someone else. And the education of what it is to be an American and to have pride in our country, that has gone by the wayside. Sadly, sadly, sadly. And it's happened on our watch, Don.
Yeah, and the uniqueness of what we have. I remember reading about when George Washington uh, elected to not run for president a third term and to not accept it. They were going to give it to him, and they wanted to make him a king. And when he walked away from it, I think it was King George in Great Britain said, if he walks away from that, he'll be the greatest man who ever lived. I mean, that's how unusual it was. People, princes, kings, queens, they don't walk away from power. To walk away from that and go back to the farm, Cincinnatus from back in the Roman times was the other guy who did it, from where we get our name of the city, Cincinnati, of course, right? So that is rare. And to have leadership willing to do that, to serve, and then go back to their farm, that's what it was based on. And we need to bring it back to that. That's patriotism.
And I think that's what I admire about Trump, because he clearly he ran to be president of the United States for one reason, and one reason only, is to make America great again, to turn this country around, because we were and are still very close to actually losing it. And so many people look at here in his second term. Legitimately, it's his third, but it's his second term. And the
Yeah.
people
Hmm.
that have come from all walks of business life in America and have said, I want to help you. I want to help
Hmm.
America. We've got some of the best and brightest people that are helping our president to turn this country around. The sad part is the long lived politicians that don't want the status quo to change, that are bucking the changes that we must make as a country in order to turn this around. Where our debt is just so astronomical, and for all of the waste, fraud, and abuse that Doge has found in so many
Oh,
areas, that's and that's the type of thing. We have to shrink our government back. Our government is so big, and it doesn't need to be this big. It's too big for its britches.
oh, and interestingly enough, this is, if I know my history a little bit, the first president who hasn't been a lawyer or a general in a really long time. I mean, I can't think of when the last one was. Well, I think George
Reagan.
Washington. Well, they were primarily farmers, but George Washington, John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, yes, lawyers, but they were primarily like farmers. It's been that long. And I think one of the great things about it is to have a business person come and apply the principles of business to
Yes.
government. Like you look at what Elon Doge did. What was the first thing he did when he bought? Was it Twitter?
Yep.
He got rid of like 75% of the employees, and the thing was just as efficient. So figuring out the efficiency and waste, you could apply, and we see it, you can apply the same thing to government. How many of these people are not producing
Yeah.
anything. Um, well, you have to remove that for the benefit of the taxpayers. Remember, we run the tendency of thinking that the government job is for the employee. No, it's for the taxpayer. And we can't forget that. Just like the job for the company is not for the employee, it's for the end customer. Um,
You're exactly right. And and as Elon Musk said when Trump appointed him into Doge, was that he said, Elon says, we're going to get rid of the redundancies because there's going to, we have way more agencies than we ever needed. And then each of those agencies have all these department heads, and they're duplicating a lot of things. They all have to, and government has never wanted to shrink. It always wants more money. Every agency wants to grow and wants more money. And I think instead of looking out for our country's best interest, they've been focusing on their best interest of what their little fiefdom can do and grow. And that's so I think it's wonderful that the peoples that have come and stepped forward. When you look at some of the people on the Doge team, I watched a board meeting that Elon Musk held of his Doge team. And this one young man says, oh, yeah, I dropped out of Harvard or Yale or wherever he was going. And he says, because I can learn more here in just a short amount of time that I will ever learn in a classroom. And these are some of our brightest minds in computer science, and the programs that they're writing to be able to analyze things. It's exciting. It's actually exciting to see what they are doing and what they are finding. But what we have to do is get these cuts codified so that this doesn't just
yes.
get amplified again in a different administration.
Absolutely. And kind of staying with that theme around how we educate our young, I just pulled and it also gets us local because it gets us to Portland, which is always fun. You can always smile and laugh when we're talking about Portland. So here's this another article about the insanity of Portland, right? So the voters just approved 1.83. Get that? That's billion in a broke state, by the way, to the Portland Public Schools. They passed this bond of that 1.8 billion, by the way. Like 1.3 billion of that is for 3 high schools in Portland. So these are going to be the 3 most expensive high schools ever built in the United States, according to this article. And Jefferson High School, Cleveland High School, and the third one is called Wells, which probably means they renamed it to something else. I'm sure it's one of the president's schools that they renamed. Yeah, I can't remember which one because they keep doing that. They haven't gotten around to renaming Jefferson and Cleveland yet. But I know for sure those 2 are in areas where there's no kids, first of all. I mean, so they're making these beautiful buildings where there's no kids, number one. Number 2, they don't have any standards in terms of academic excellence. They don't even have a standard to
No,
graduate
they
anymore.
don't.
The governor got rid of them. So it's the application of common sense isn't happening. It's a complete waste of taxpayers' money to spend it where A, there's no kids, B, where there's no standards anyway, and C, by the way, the demographics don't support it because the population is going down of families who have kids in those areas on top of that. If they were doing the rational thing, Jefferson should have been closed a long time. And so should Cleveland. If you know anything about the area, both of those high schools should have been closed a long time ago. But they should be closing them because we don't have any
Yeah.
kids. and the cost of housing is so high that if you did have kids, you couldn't afford to live in those areas anyway, due to the regentrification that's happened in those neighborhoods. So it's just classic that you would do something that insane. So goes things in Portland. Let me stop and
Yeah, well,
any thoughts?
the renters must have passed the bill, right? The voters approved it. I don't,
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't know.
What what else can you say? It's like when I'm not sure what it's going to take for them to wake up, and smell the coffee in Portland. Because at the same time, here's the other article I thought that was fascinating. Again, Portland centric, because when you're talking Portland, You know it's going to be something crazy. And in this case, they passed a bill. I can't remember how many millions this was. Let me see. To transmit money from the Portland Police Department to the Portland Park Bureau. Now, what's the number one, or at least one of the top two issues in Portland? Well, it's going to be public safety. What's the number one job of a government? To protect the citizens. So what do? They take $2 million from, let me see it now. They take $2 million from the police bureau and move it to the park maintenance. Are you kidding me? Now, I love the park bureau. I used to work for the park bureau when I was in high school and grade school and all that, right? But hey, look, I'd rather have tall grass in the park and be safe than be robbed and raped. You can't go to the park anyway,
Right.
right? But that's the mindset of those who run Portland. It's just stunning.
Well, let's see. This is Portland's new government that they've elected in. They've revamped the whole thing. They've brought it. The mayor is basically neutered. The mayor of Portland is now just a mouthpiece with no weight to do anything, because they have given all of it to the city council. And they've added more city councilors who then added staff. They each wanted 4 staff, and in a city that is broke. And so this was their solution. They didn't call it defund the police, but that's just what they did. Defunding a police department by $2 million is a lot of money. I don't know how many positions that represents. Maybe that's 2 full-time policemen. Maybe it's 4. I don't know, when you add in the PERS and all the benefits and everything. And yet crime is not going down there. It's
Yeah.
going up. And so, well, we'll just beautify the place and people will feel good, even though they're getting robbed
We
and raped and murdered.
better places, better places for people to sleep in the parks.
Yeah, there we go. We want the parks better for the homeless to sleep in, because we're going to take them off of the streets. But, now it is crazy. And in Portland, what else they have done? The Oregon school districts, so the legislators, there's a Senate bill 916 that is going to have a vote tomorrow. And that is, the Senate bill would provide unemployment benefits to all striking workers, including public employees. But lo and behold, the local school districts are taking issue with the bill, which is estimated to cost public employers nearly $6 million in the next budget year. And the school district leaders, this is like one of the maybe smartest things I've heard them say the strike would lead to unmanageable costs.
When did they ever care about unmanageable costs?
No, not that I've ever seen. Not that I've ever seen. It's crazy. And maybe the schools and the teachers will unions, because the schools are with the school district leaders. They're not the teachers unions, but they're saying this is not a good bill. And so if you don't like this bill, go, and I'm going to post a link to this article that has a link to the bill. Go put some testimony in and say no, because that's the process, right? We have to be active in our political process and voice a no on Senate Bill 916, because tomorrow they're going to be voting on it. Let your leader, your electeds. I won't call them leaders, because frankly, I'm not looking up to any of them. But
Yeah.
those that are supposed to represent us, and ask them to vote no. And if you live in a Democrat district, that would be a real good thing too, because you've got a Democrat representing you, and they need to hear from you, whether you voted for them or not.
And the thing is, you got to put up resistance. I mean, even if it looks like a losing cause, every bit of energy is helpful. It may not be helpful in the immediate term. You may feel like you're just, spitting in the wind, if you will. But over time, it does eventually, matter. Even if these people have to feel the pain before they come around, because you cannot keep doing
No.
this. At some point, it's just so. What happens is these inner cities start getting hot. I never think of Portland as a city big enough to have an inner city, but it does, and it eventually get hollowed out as more and more of the tax base either moves to the suburbs, because it's not like that in Clackamas County, for example. Um, and you start moving out to those places, or to other parts of the state, or even out of the state. And we see that Portland's experienced net loss of population, and it's losing the wrong kind of population too.
Yes, it is.
The tax, yeah, the taxpaying kind,
Yes, it is.
the law abiding kind.
Yeah. So, a little more on the legislators in Oregon. The uh, Oregon legislatures, the lawmakers, voted to expand the state's plastic bag ban. Now, they're going to steal the kicker. The governor wants to steal the kicker. And here they are. Oh my gosh, we have got to expand the ban on plastic bags across this state. So, beginning in 2027, grocers and restaurants will have to use recycled paper bags.
You can't think of a more unserious thing. You think about all the issues. We've got homeless, we've got fentanyl, we got crime rate through the roof. All these serious issues, and they're spending energy on plastic bags. I mean, really, it just blows your mind. Declining attendance in schools, like gangs running the streets, right? And we're talking about plastic bags. It's just incredible.
Right. Let's ban plastic bags and make you use paper straws that are full of chemicals and disintegrate very shortly, very quickly. I've used one of those paper straws once and I will never use it again. I guess I was just for the experience and I went, oh no, this is chemicals. No, thank you.
It's,
And,
yeah.
you know,
You have to work so hard to get a drink. You got to be an Olympic athlete just to suck enough air through that thing to get a drink.
oh goodness.
Well, I just had a chuckle. I saw Marjorie. I saw your comment. Your parents went to Jefferson and Grant. That was a completely different Jefferson and Grant when they went there. Trust me. They probably didn't have teenagers, pushing baby strollers through the halls like they do
Oh
now.
my
But I
gosh.
digress.
That's so sad too, It really
Um,
is.
uh,
It's so sad. So
yeah, no, it is
we
absolutely.
were talking earlier about uh, what Doge has done, and Doge. I want to go back to that a minute because Doge has found $14 billion in Medicaid fraud, waste, and abuse. Dr. Mehmet Oz has said 14 billion with a B. And it is part of it is people that have been in one state and on Medicaid and they move to another state. Both states are still billing for Medicaid. How can that be?
Uh, yeah,
They're still collecting money from the
only a
federal
government.
government for the person who doesn't even live there anymore. And
Difficult can
did
we
I
be
lose
able
you?
to continue being? I can hear you fine. Can you hear me?
Yes. Yes, yes, I
Okay.
can. Yes, I can. I don't know what happened.
Yeah.
So,
No, I was just saying a private
I'm
organization could never.
no, no way. No way. A private organization is not going to be doing that. And, but to not have access to, I mean, this is pretty basic that they know that these people that with the same social security numbers and whatever is living in two different places and the states are still billing for them. And and they're saying, we have people that are illegal in our country on Medicaid, should not be. Medicaid is for people that are disabled, people that are poor, and so right now they're saying that people that we need able-bodied individuals and illegal immigrants that have received Medicaid benefits. They need to be, if they're going to be receiving this, one, they shouldn't be receiving them, but there needs to be a requirement for people. It was for as I mentioned, like I've got a real good girlfriend of mine who's receiving Medicaid benefits. She's disabled. She's partially paralyzed and lives in Section 8 housing. And this is a person that, because of her brain injury, um, doesn't have a filter. I love her to death, but doesn't have a
Yeah.
filter. And how do you employ somebody like that doesn't have a filter, to even might be able to answer a phone, but might blow off at the customer, you know,
I've worked for a few of those people.
you know.
they get they get promoted.
And I love my girlfriend, but I would tell you it would be you would be getting some complaints from some of the customers going, "Do you know what she said?" you know, and
Right.
so people do there. We do have people in our society that needs help, and that's okay. I believe that that's okay, giving people help, but they would like to have those that are able to work some and have some requirements for low income adults to receive Medicaid health insurance. And it would increase those requirements for food assistance and things like that. But imagine that $14 billion in fraud, waste, and abuse.
Oh, if you just reduce the fraud, waste, that by itself, not to mention out now theft, but just the fraud, waste, and abuse, what can be saved? Um, it's just amazing. You look at these numbers, you can hardly believe it. Um,
Yes, absolutely.
it is what it
And
is.
speaking
Yeah.
of other numbers, Rick Grinnell, who's the interim executive director at the Kennedy Center, said an internal investigation found 26 million with an M in fake revenue. So they got a new chief financial officer and went through their 2024 and 2025 budgets at the Kennedy Center and found 26 million in phantom revenue. And he says we want these
Wow.
people to be prosecuted because how do you, as the Kennedy Center, present this is our budget and this is our revenue forecast and whatever to investors or donors, and you're giving them fake information? He says this is phantom revenue and fake revenue, and it's now being referred to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And good for them, So there's a lot of waste, fraud, and abuse still getting found, and people that are willing to, like Rick Grinnell, I was mentioning earlier, we've got some of the most brilliant minds that are helping to turn things around in our country.
And these are all the reasons why, when you think about it at a very fundamental level, the founders were for very small government. You want the least amount of government possible, because it's easy to spend other people's
Yeah.
money. A private citizen or a private organization will never allow itself to get ripped off to this degree. To have 150-year-olds getting checks, for example,
Yeah.
they would have figured out a system to stop that sort of thing from happening. It may happen a few times, but then they would quickly fix it. And with the government, the incentives just aren't there to do that. So these are the reasons why, and I think it was Abraham Lincoln who originally said something along the lines of whatever a citizen can do for themselves, a citizen should do for themselves. Because to have the government doing things that it shouldn't be doing, the worst kinds of people gravitate towards it, and it's just too easy to put your fingers in the pot. It just is. You look at retail. I think it's considered, if you can have, let's say you're Walmart, if you can have pilferage at 3% or less, that's considered very successful. Think about how hard it would be to manage a store and have less than 3% going out of the door. When your margins are really
Yeah.
slim as they are in that business. And then you think about the government. where I don't know what the pilferage is. Obviously, it's super high, and you don't have a profit and loss incentive, because if Walmart doesn't do that, they eventually go bankrupt. They got to lay people off. They got to move out of cities. They have to do all those things. But the government never has to do that stuff until, especially the federal government, until the whole thing collapses, and none of us want to be around for that. So I love the idea of that, the Trumpian idea of moving us back to the William McKinley era, where the whole thing ran on fees from tariffs, and other countries paid it instead of citizens paying
Hmm.
taxes. Uh, that's a big idea, boy. I tell you, that would be monumental and historic. That would solve a ton of other problems by itself.
Yes, it would. And he's working hard to try to get us there. But unfortunately, the deep state politicians are doing everything they can to thwart that. So, but and it takes us, we the people, to be involved in our government. And in fact, if anybody um, has an ability to go help in Washington D.C., has some talent, and would like to go help our own government in Washington, D.C., they're hiring people that are looking to actually make a difference in our nation. And and we've got such wonderful talent that is helping our country to turn around and helping the Trump administration to turn around. And it won't happen um, by itself.
Well, here's where I think what makes us different from, say, the mother countries, Great Britain. I'm sure you've heard the stories about what's going on there. So, for example, I think a police officer tweeted something that the government didn't like, and so they threw him in jail. So they're already doing anti-freedom of speech stuff. And we heard both Trump and the vice president speak to that when we were there. And I was reading a couple of articles about what's going on there with that sort of thing. They are, though, I don't think their population is the same as here. I think the freedom loving component, they've never had it to the degree that we've had it here. And I think when you go to the general population, our leadership class is deeply flawed, like far worse than the general population. The general population is not there yet. We're not on a great trajectory, but we're not there. I think, and that's why I think there's still hope. If there weren't, there's no way he would have won this election, given how the entire apparatus was against him. When you think about the miracle of that, if there was even a reasonable press reporting this stuff, that should have been a landslide of Reagan versus Mondale proportions,
Yeah.
and he should have literally won, like, not Delaware, and that's it. But it was still a landslide in spite of all of that, which tells me that the core of the country is not crazy.
Thank
Of
God.
course, we live in yeah, we happen to be in the craziest part of
Oh,
that country. We
yes.
have to always remember.
Yes.
we're in downtown Stalingrad out here in Oregon and Washington, right? But California, but it's still not as crazy as it is in Europe.
No, no, it isn't. And I want to touch on something. I've posted a link to an article of, you know, Marco Rubio has done a couple of things. And he says, if you do this one thing, you can no longer enter the US. This is an article from PJ Media. And Sarah Anderson wrote this today. And he said, that for too long, Americans have been fined, harassed, and even charged by foreign authorities for exercising their free speech rights. Free speech is essential to the American way of life, a birthright over which foreign governments have no authority. And he essentially said, today I'm announcing a new visa restriction policy that will apply to foreign officials and persons who are complicit in censoring Americans. Foreigners who work to undermine the rights of Americans should not enjoy the privilege of traveling to our country. And you know what? I love that. I love that because we do have the right as a sovereign nation to, and all nations have this right, but we have the right to determine who gets to come into our country. And so I like that. He says, because they are threatening, like over in England, that if you are a tour American and you put out a tweet or a meme that is critical of the UK and you go travel to the UK on vacation, then wham bam, you can get arrested and get
Yeah.
convicted and thrown in jail. And I'll tell you, no, this is over the top what they're trying to do with the tyranny and of globalism and control.
And that's yet one more reason why the importance of protecting our national sovereignty is so important. If we wind up in a what they call it, one world government, then people in Brussels and then people in London and people who think like that would be imposing their policies on American citizens because clearly they don't believe in free speech in those places. They believe in speech that's in agreement with what the government thinks.
Yeah.
And they got you think we have cameras? Britain's London, they got cameras everywhere. I mean, you can't even like go anywhere without some facial recognition. I mean, it's like they're not as bad as the Chinese yet, where they lock you in your apartment and that's it, or they have social scores. But it's very easy to get from here to there when you got cameras and monitoring stuff everywhere, and a state that's willing to do it. So that's reason enough to pretty much walk away from the United Nations and all that stuff, to my mind. I mean, it's anti-national sovereignty. We want none of that.
True. The other thing that Marco Rubio, our Secretary of State, I'll tell you, I think he's doing a fabulous job. He says the U.S. is to start revoking visas of Chinese students. The visa revocations will include students with connection to the Chinese Communist Party and those studying in critical fields. Well, there a few weeks ago, it was stated that Chinese students that are coming to America, they must comply with spying for China. They are here getting, I read this on X, and they are, I guess they're getting sent here to, while they're in school, to spy. And
You know, it's crazy. Think to yourself, why? What other country in history has educated their enemies' kids? And it's not just the Chinese. I mean, obviously, you have the ones in the Middle East who are the anti-Semitic
yeah,
types who are calling for the lives of Jews, and we're losing lives. We all seen what happened last week. You're a guest. It's like a guest coming to your house and then destroying your house. Why in the world will we do that? They're getting what used to be a first class education, not so much anymore.
no,
But on the taxpayer's dime on top of that. So we're taking taxes from people, and let's just say the Appalachians, kids who are never going to see the halls of an Ivy League school, and we're giving it to people from another country. It's bad enough to be giving it to a blue blood from like Boston, but to be giving it to somebody from another country, a country that is our
yeah.
enemy, that this kid actually might be facing on the battlefield, it's like insane. Um,
And Marco Rubio, being a descendant of Cuban refugees, knows a lot about communism and the ploys of communists and the oppression of that. And I think it makes him extra savvy as our Secretary of State. I'm really impressed with him, with what he's doing, and and there's also a consortium. There's others that are helping with these international negotiations, and that nobody is doing one thing alone. It's teamwork, and that's what I really, really see in this Trump administration is the teamwork that is happening, to that the different agencies working together that haven't necessarily worked together before, because there is the common goal of, let's find the waste, fraud, and abuse of all the various agencies, and also bring to account to the stopping the lawfare, stopping the Chinese from coming into our country. Why should we grant visas to those that are wanting to cause riots and say, death to America, and are you know, pro Hamas?
Yeah, I'm just thinking you wouldn't you don't see the Chinese government accepting American citizens. And by the way, what American citizens are going to these countries to go to school in the first place, which is yet another story. But you would not, they would not tolerate that for 15 seconds. You try that in Turkey, Iraq, Iran, any of those countries. You know, I don't know if you go to jail, you'd probably be dead before you got to jail. So why would we tolerate that?
Yeah. So to answer Marjorie's question, and they said the killing of those two Jewish young people, I'll tell you, it's really sad. Um,
That just happened. I missed that case in Seattle.
yeah, yeah. So I don't know, because truthfully, I know only a little bit. This is like just triggering a memory, because I have been pretty sick, you guys, and so I'm just happy to be able to be here tonight. And there's a few things that I've paid attention to, but it is really sad of what's going on, and of course Antifa in Seattle. I'm glad that the Seattle police have been cracking down more. That's what I believe I remember reading. And, but, you know,
But you notice how all of this stuff's coming from the
oh,
left. They love to talk about right wing radicals all the time, but where does all this violence come from? So let's see. Who stabbed the insurance executive in the back in New York City? Oh, that was leftists. Oh, who tried to burn down the governor's mansion in Pennsylvania with his family in it? Oh, like another leftist. Who's burning down Tesla dealerships? Oh, it's a leftist. Um, who shot those poor kids in Washington D.C. outside of the embassy? Oh, like another. You just go down the line. It's all radical leftists, the Antifa mob, Black Lives Matter mob, and it looks like another thing in Seattle. And it's all being fueled by their rhetoric. Who's been screaming Hitler, Hitler, Hitler for the last, like, this guy's been going on like 8 years, 10 years of this stuff, um, without any data or evidence to back it up.
yeah, absolutely. It is the left, and it is the sadly, so many have been trans people, highly medicated. But what you also have right now is the left calling for the violence, calling for people to be killed, and calling for the violence. And that is going to, some nut out there is going to go, oh, that's what I should do, and it's it's a shame, because truthfully, the the more conservative side of our nation, we don't do that. We don't, this so called January 6th riot was not a riot. It was not an insurrection. It was none of those things. It was an absolute setup by our government. And so, but had we wanted to, it certainly could have been. But you haven't seen that by the conservative side at all anywhere.
Well, heck, I think the only person killed was a conservative woman.
Yes, definitely. Murdered.
So what is
Murdered. Ashley Babbitt was
that?
absolutely murdered. And, but, and it is the left that is the violent side, and the paid agitators, the George Soros type groups, that's what I believe, that they have been very much paid to go and protest and cause, burn things down. Look at those Molotov cocktails that were done. Well, I've got a funny thing that I would like to end on. A little bit of a funny thing. And this
All
is,
right.
I'm going to post the article here in the comments. And that is, it's in PJ Media. David Manny wrote this yesterday. When Antarctica grows ice and science gets cold feet. And if you didn't know, Antarctica, they said, oh my gosh, Antarctica grew a bunch of ice between 2021 and 2023. And it's not by computer models, it's from satellite pictures that they can, it's satellite verified admission. And and yet there has been a scientist, Dr. Roy Spencer, he's a climatologist and former NASA scientist. He's made a career out of questioning the overconfidence in climate modeling, and he's long argued climate models consistently run hot. Well, I'll tell you, it's the days might be getting a little warmer because summer's coming, but the Antarctic got more ice. Now, I think part of that has to do, and it's not mentioned in this article, interestingly enough, but there was a Hunga Tonga eruption, volcanic eruption in Tonga. It was the largest undersea volcano ever to explode, and it put so much moisture up in our atmosphere that I think, and what goes up must come down, right? I think that that could very well have contributed to that. I'm not a scientist, but I do have common sense. And I think that could be. But it's what is amazing is that um, more scientists, true climate scientists, are not going, oh my gosh, we were wrong. Oh my God.
Well, I think part of this that they can finally feel like they can speak up without losing their professional life. I mean, I think there are a lot of people who were look at what we've gone through the last 4 years. It took a lot of gumption, courage, whatever it takes to say anything. And now that we have an administration that's saying the things that you weren't supposed to be able to say, people are being more and more comfortable speaking up, and that's a great
Yes, it
thing.
is. Yes, it is. And Robert F. Kennedy Jr., our medical guy, head of our medical now. Thank you.
HHS, yeah.
He
Mhm.
says we're following real science now. We're not following junk science anymore. We're going to be following real science and real studies. And I am thankful for that because we need to be able to trust our scientists, but they've lost all credibility. So many have lost credibility because they were not talking about, willing to speak up and talk about the truth. And that's something else I love about Trump's administration is people that were the so-called deniers are the ones that are now heading those departments.
Oh, it's absolutely fantastic. It is so fantastic. And I don't know if we ever get to the very bottom of this because it's so evil, it's hard to believe. But you have to think, I mean, just if you're just objective about this. So we let companies sell a product that the government forced the citizen to buy, um, and then provided them with immunity. So if the product was harmful, they couldn't be sued. Talk about the biggest racket in history. And that's what we did without knowing anything about science, whether it works or not, or anything else. That by itself should have given anyone tremendous pause. And then started paying people to take it on top of that. They started with that. And then when not enough people were taking it, then we went to coercion.
Yes.
Uh, to coerce people to put something in their body flies against every human rights thing that Western civilizations created over the last 100 years. But they did it anyway. And as the data starts to come out around all of the problems that have come from that, well, I don't know. That's going to be some pretty rough fallout.
It is, but
Pretty
it
rough.
needs to happen. We need, frankly, more like Nuremberg trials. We need the truth to come out so that that never happens again. It has to
No,
never happen again. And
we absolutely
yeah,
have.
absolutely.
No.
Don, thank you so
Well, I
much. Thank you.
absolutely. I did want to give one last closing thought because I think this is such a
Yes.
beautiful way to close this. Yes. So you all remember at the beginning of the discussion that I talked about the "My Country 'Tis of Thee." Well, I've never read the last stanza, and I was going to read this to you because I think it's such an appropriate thing, and it gives you a sense for what those people who came before us taught us in terms of understanding what we have. So just listen to this. No more shall tyrants hear, with haughty steps appear, and soldier bands. No more shall tyrants tread above the patriot dead. No more our blood be shed by alien hands. Whoa. and 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 there's another stanza like it, but that is like just amazing. Take that home with you to the bank. That's what our country was founded on. So that stuff would stop happening and not happen to us again. But other governments, or dare I say it, our own government. And that, my friends, I think is a wrap.
That is a wrap. Thank you, Don.
you all have a, you all have a great week. It was great seeing you all once again, or speaking to you all once again. And we'll see you next time.
Good night.
Good night, everybody. Let's see, do I end?